In a small, quiet town surrounded by lush green hills and narrow, winding roads, there lived an old woman named Eleanor Harper. She was 78 years old, with silver hair that shimmered faintly in the sunlight and soft wrinkles etched into her kind face. Eleanor wasn't someone you'd notice at first glance. She dressed simply, spoke softly, and preferred to stay out of the spotlight. But those who knew her well understood that beneath her unassuming exterior lay a heart full of warmth, wisdom, and a deep love for music. Eleanor's days were predictable yet comforting. Every morning she would wake up early, sip a cup of chamomile tea while gazing out at her garden, and then tend to her flowers. Her roses were particularly famous among her neighbors. They bloomed vibrantly even during the harshest winters, thanks to Eleanor's careful nurturing. After spending time outdoors, she'd retreat indoors to her cozy living room, where an old upright piano stood proudly against one wall. It had been in her family for decades, passed down through generations, and it carried countless memories within its polished wood. The piano wasn't just an instrument, it was a companion. Eleanor often found herself running her fingers over its keys late at night when sleep eluded her. Sometimes she played lively tunes that brought back memories of dancing with her late husband James in their tiny kitchen. Other times she chose slower, melancholic melodies that seemed to echo the ache of missing him. James had always admired her talent, encouraging her to pursue music professionally when they were younger. But life had other plans. Instead, Eleanor became a music teacher, dedicating herself to nurturing young minds and helping them discover the joy of music. Though retirement had come years ago, Eleanor still occasionally gave lessons to local children or helped prepare students for recitals. However, most of her performances these days were private, meant only for herself and the walls of her home. Outside of her immediate community, very few people knew about her skill or cared to know. And Eleanor was perfectly fine with that. Fame and recognition didn't interest her. All she wanted was to live peacefully and keep her connection to music alive. One sunny afternoon, as Eleanor strolled through the aisles of her neighborhood grocery store, pushing her cart filled with fresh vegetables and bread, something unusual happened. A young man approached her, his energy almost too bright for the calm atmosphere of the shop. He introduced himself as Greg, a producer working for a popular daytime television show. With a friendly smile, he explained that his team was searching for ordinary people with extraordinary talents for a segment called Hidden Gems. They hoped to feature individuals whose skills might otherwise go unnoticed. At first, Eleanor laughed politely, thinking he must be mistaken. Surely he couldn't mean her. She told him she was just an old woman who enjoyed playing the piano in her spare time. But Greg persisted, explaining how unique her story sounded and how inspiring it could be for viewers. He promised that participating wouldn't require much effort, just a short audition and maybe a live performance if things went well. Despite her initial reluctance, Eleanor felt a flicker of curiosity. Perhaps this could be a way to share her love for classical music with a wider audience, something James would have encouraged her to do. Still, saying yes wasn't easy. Eleanor wrestled with doubts over the next few days. What if she embarrassed herself? What if no one cared about what she had to offer? Yet in the end, her desire to honor James's memory outweighed her fears. If nothing else, she thought, this could be a chance to remind people of the beauty of classical music, a genre she feared was slowly fading away. So, with a mix of excitement and nervousness, Eleanor agreed to give it a try. Little did she know, this decision would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. The day of the audition arrived, and Eleanor stepped into the bustling television studio feeling like a fish out of water. The air buzzed with energy as performers of all kinds hurried around, adjusting costumes, tuning instruments, or rehearsing last-minute lines. There were dancers stretching on the floor, singers warming up their voices with scales that echoed through the hall, and magicians practicing card tricks in quiet corners. Eleanor clutched her sheet music tightly to her chest, trying to blend into the background as best she could. She felt like an outsider in this world of glitz and glamour, a grandmother in sensible shoes surrounded by young, confident entertainers. Greg, the producer who had convinced her to come, greeted her warmly and led her to a small waiting area backstage. He assured her everything would go smoothly, but his words did little to calm her nerves. As she sat there, Eleanor couldn't help but notice how different she looked compared to everyone else. Most of the other participants wore bold outfits designed to catch the eye, bright colors, sequins, feathers, and elaborate accessories. In contrast, Eleanor had chosen a simple navy blue dress paired with her favorite pearl necklace. It was modest yet elegant, just like her. When her name was finally called, Eleanor took a deep breath and walked toward the stage where the judges were seated. They were three well-known personalities from the entertainment industry. A stern-looking woman known for her sharp critiques, a jovial comedian famous for his quick wit, and a musician who had made a name for himself as part of a popular band. All three seemed distracted as Eleanor approached, scrolling through their phones or chatting quietly among themselves. Greg gave her an encouraging nod from the sidelines, and she forced herself to smile despite the knot forming in her stomach. Eleanor sat down at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys for a moment before she began. She had decided to play one of her favorites, a Chopin nocturne. It was a piece she knew inside and out, one that always transported her to another place when she played it. At first, the judges barely glanced up, continuing their conversations, as if she weren't even there. But within seconds, something remarkable happened. The room grew quieter. The soft, lilting notes of the nocturne filled the space, weaving a spell that seemed to silence every other sound. It started subtly, a slight pause in the chatter, a raised eyebrow, a head turning in curiosity. Then, one by one, the judges stopped what they were doing and focused entirely on Eleanor. Her hands moved across the keys with grace and precision, each note flowing seamlessly into the next. There was no grand flourish or attempt to impress. Instead, her playing carried a quiet intensity, as though she were telling a story only she understood. The melody swelled and softened, evoking emotions that lingered long after the final chord faded away. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence stretched out, heavy with awe. Finally, the stern judge leaned forward, her expression softened. "That was breathtaking," she said, searching for the right words. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Eleanor blushed, caught off guard by the compliment. "I've been playing since I was a child," she replied humbly. "It's always been my passion." The comedian chimed in next, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're telling me you've had this kind of talent your whole life and we're only hearing about it now? What gives?" Eleanor chuckled softly. "Well, I never saw much reason to share it beyond my family and students. Music has always been personal for me. It's how I express myself." The third judge, the musician, nodded thoughtfully. "That's exactly why it feels so genuine. You're not trying to perform for us. You're letting the music speak for itself. That's rare these days." Their praise left Eleanor both touched and slightly uncomfortable. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not in such a public setting. Still, she appreciated their sincerity and the way they seemed to truly understand what her music meant to her. Despite the overwhelmingly positive reaction, not everyone behind the scenes shared the judges' enthusiasm. Backstage, whispers began to circulate among the production crew. Some argued that while Eleanor's performance was impressive, it lacked the flashy appeal needed to captivate a modern audience. One staffer suggested adding visual effects or dramatic lighting to make her act more exciting. Another proposed having her play pop songs instead of classical pieces, believing it would resonate better with younger viewers. Greg, however, refused to let anyone diminish Eleanor's authenticity. He reminded them that her charm lay precisely in her simplicity, that she represented something real and timeless in a world often obsessed with trends. After some debate, the team reluctantly agreed to move forward with her as part of the live show. But they made it clear they expected her to adapt to the demands of television, whether she liked it or not. As Eleanor prepared to leave the studio after the audition, Greg pulled her aside. With a mixture of excitement and concern, he explained that the producers wanted to tweak certain aspects of her performance for the broadcast. They envisioned her wearing something more glamorous, perhaps even incorporating elements of theater into her act. Eleanor listened patiently, nodding along, but inside she felt uneasy. This wasn't what she had signed up for. She hadn't come here to be transformed into someone she wasn't, to have her art packaged and presented in a way that felt foreign to her. On the drive home, Eleanor replayed the conversation in her mind. She thought about the joy she found in playing the piano, the way it connected her to memories of James and the countless hours they'd spent together, listening to records or dancing in their living room. Would those moments still feel the same, if she allowed others to dictate how she expressed herself? Could she stay true to who she was while stepping onto such a large platform? By the time she reached her house, Eleanor had made up her mind. She wouldn't let fear or pressure change her. If she was going to appear on national television, she would do it her way, with honesty, heart, and the music that had always been her constant companion. Whatever happened next, she vowed to honor not just her own journey but also the legacy of love and creativity that James had inspired in her. Little did she know, her decision would lead to a moment that would leave millions speechless and prove that sometimes the simplest acts of authenticity can shine brighter than anything artificial. As the days leading up to the live broadcast ticked by, Eleanor found herself caught in a whirlwind of preparations that felt more like a storm than anything resembling calm. The show's team had wasted no time turning her quiet agreement into a full-blown production. Every detail of her appearance and performance was scrutinized, dissected, and reimagined, sometimes without even consulting her. Eleanor tried to remind herself why she had agreed to this in the first place: to share her love for music with a wider audience, to inspire others, and perhaps to honor James's memory in a new way. But as the pressure mounted, those intentions began to feel buried under layers of expectations she hadn't anticipated. The wardrobe department insisted on dressing her in something modern and eye-catching. They showed her sketches of glittering gowns adorned with sequins and feathers, outfits that looked better suited for a pop star than a grandmother who preferred cardigans and floral prints. When Eleanor hesitated, they explained that viewers needed to be visually captivated before they could appreciate her talent. "We want them to see you as a star, Eleanor," one stylist said brightly, holding up a particularly dazzling dress. "This is your moment." Eleanor forced a polite smile but felt a pang of unease. She didn't want people to focus on what she was wearing. She wanted them to listen, to really hear the music. Still, she agreed to try on the outfits, hoping to find something that struck a balance between their vision and her comfort. After hours of fittings and adjustments, she settled on a shimmering silver shawl draped over a simple black dress. It wasn't her usual style, but it wasn't completely overwhelming either. She told herself it would do. Next came the discussions about her repertoire. The producers suggested replacing her classical pieces with upbeat jazz standards, or even popular songs from recent decades. "People connect better with music they recognize," one of them argued. "Classical is beautiful, sure, but it's not exactly relatable." Eleanor listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap as they rattled off ideas. Inside, she bristled at the implication that her beloved Chopin or Debussy wouldn't resonate with modern audiences. Music wasn't supposed to be about trends. It was about emotion, connection, storytelling. Yet she nodded along, promising to consider their suggestions. At home, Eleanor sat at her piano late at night, running through the proposed pieces. She practiced jazzy chords and syncopated rhythms, attempting to infuse them with the same passion she brought to her classical favorites. But something felt off. Her heart wasn't in it. Each note sounded hollow, lacking the depth and meaning she poured into works like Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor or Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. She missed the weight of those compositions, the way they seemed to breathe life into her soul. As much as she wanted to make the producers happy, she couldn't imagine abandoning the music that had been her companion for decades. Her doubts grew stronger as the rehearsal schedule intensified. The show's staff arranged mock performances, where Eleanor was encouraged to add dramatic flourishes to her playing, such as standing up during climactic moments or gesturing dramatically with her hands. At one point, someone even suggested incorporating a fog machine to create a mysterious ambiance. Eleanor politely declined, explaining that she wanted her music to speak for itself. But the constant push for spectacle left her feeling drained and uncertain. Was she being selfish by refusing to adapt? Or was she right to protect the integrity of her art? On the morning of the live broadcast, Eleanor woke up earlier than usual, unable to shake the nervous energy coursing through her body. She brewed a pot of tea and stared out the window at her garden, watching the sunlight filter through the leaves. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine staying home instead of heading to the studio. She pictured herself sitting at her piano in peace, playing whatever her heart desired without an audience or cameras. It was tempting, but she knew she couldn't back out now. Too many people were counting on her, and deep down, she still believed in the power of sharing her gift. When she arrived at the studio, the atmosphere was electric. Crew members scurried around with clipboards and headsets, shouting instructions and making final adjustments. Eleanor was ushered into a small dressing room, where a makeup artist and hairstylist worked tirelessly to transform her appearance. They applied foundation, blush, and eyeshadow, careful not to smudge her pearls, which she had insisted on wearing. Her hair was styled into soft waves, framing her face in a way that made her look younger yet unfamiliar to herself. When she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. "You look stunning," the makeup artist exclaimed, stepping back to admire her work. Eleanor managed a weak smile, though her stomach churned with anxiety. She felt like an imposter dressed in someone else's clothes, her natural self hidden beneath layers of polish and glamour. Greg knocked on the door just as Eleanor was adjusting the sequined shawl draped over her shoulders. He looked exhausted, but genuinely excited. "You ready?" he asked, his voice filled with encouragement. Eleanor nodded slowly, though she wasn't sure if she truly was. Greg must have noticed her hesitation because he knelt beside her chair and placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "Listen, Eleanor," he said softly. "You've got this. Just play like you always do, with your heart. Forget about everything else." His words lingered in her mind as she stood up and followed him backstage. The noise level increased as they approached the stage, a cacophony of voices and footsteps blending with the hum of equipment. Eleanor peeked through the curtain and saw the vast auditorium beyond, rows upon rows of seats filling with eager spectators. Cameras loomed overhead, their red lights blinking ominously. Her pulse quickened, and for a brief moment she considered bolting, but then she remembered James. His gentle laugh echoed in her memory, the way he used to joke about how she played the piano like nobody's business. He had always believed in her talent even when she doubted herself. And now, standing here on the precipice of something so far outside her comfort zone, she realized she owed it to him, and to herself, to give it her all. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor closed her eyes and let her fingers hover above an imaginary keyboard. In her mind, she replayed the melodies she loved most, letting them anchor her amidst the chaos. She thought about the stories behind each piece, the joy, the sorrow, the triumphs, and the losses woven into every note. By the time her name was announced and she stepped onto the stage, she felt a flicker of resolve ignite within her. The applause from the audience was polite but distant, almost perfunctory. Eleanor walked to the piano, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and took her seat. As the host introduced her with a light-hearted joke about Grandma rocking the keys, she smiled faintly, trying to ignore the knot in her stomach. Then, placing her hands on the keys, she made a decision, one that would change everything. Instead of launching into the upbeat number the producers had requested, Eleanor began with a piece close to her heart. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. From the very first note, the room fell silent. The rich, commanding chords filled the air, resonating with a depth and intensity that commanded attention. Eleanor closed her eyes, letting the music take over, her fingers moving with a fluidity that defied her age. The audience leaned forward, in their seats, captivated by the raw emotion pouring out of the instrument. By the time she transitioned into Debussy's Clair de Lune, there wasn't a single person in the room unaffected. The delicate arpeggios painted a picture of moonlight dancing on water, evoking a sense of wonder and nostalgia. Even the cynical crew members backstage stopped what they were doing to listen, their skepticism melting away with each passing measure. Eleanor wasn't just playing music. She was telling a story, sharing a piece of her soul with everyone present. When the final note faded into silence, there was a beat, a collective intake of breath, as if the world itself had paused to absorb what had just happened. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the auditorium erupted into thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some wiping away tears. Eleanor sat frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the response. Slowly she stood, bowing deeply as gratitude washed over her. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as an old woman clinging to the past, but as an artist whose talent transcended time and age. Backstage, Greg greeted her with a wide grin. "I told you," he said simply, shaking his head in amazement. Eleanor laughed, a sound tinged with disbelief and relief. She had done it, on her own terms. And as she looked out at the sea of smiling faces, she realized this was only the beginning. The moment Eleanor stepped off the stage, the world around her seemed to shift. The backstage area, once a flurry of nervous energy and hurried instructions, transformed into a scene of stunned silence. Crew members who had been skeptical just hours earlier now approached her with wide eyes and heartfelt compliments. "That was incredible," one technician murmured, shaking his head in disbelief. Another simply said, "Thank you," as though her performance had touched something deep within him. Even the producers who had pressured her to conform to their vision stood speechless for a moment before breaking into applause. Eleanor, still catching her breath, felt a mix of emotions swirling inside her: relief, pride, and a touch of disbelief. She had done exactly what she set out to do: play from her heart, without compromise. But she hadn't expected the reaction to be so overwhelming. As she walked through the corridors of the studio, people stopped to congratulate her, some even tearing up as they expressed how much her music meant to them. It was as if she had tapped into something universal, something that transcended age, genre, or background. By the time the live broadcast ended, clips of her performance were already making their way online. Within hours, social media platforms buzzed with excitement. Viewers posted videos of her playing, captioning them with phrases like, "This is what true talent looks like," and "She reminded me why I love music." Comments poured in from all corners of the globe. A young musician wrote about how inspired he felt to pursue classical training after hearing her interpretation of Rachmaninoff. A grandmother shared how Eleanor's story gave her hope that it's never too late to embrace your passions. Even celebrities chimed in, praising her authenticity and skill. News outlets quickly picked up on the viral sensation. Headlines read, "78-year-old pianist steals hearts on national TV," and "The Grandma Who Redefined Talent Shows." Reporters scrambled to learn more about Eleanor's life, eager to uncover the story behind the woman whose fingers danced across the keys with such grace and power. Requests for interviews flooded in, along with invitations to appear on talk shows, morning programs, and podcasts. Record labels reached out, offering contracts to release albums of her performances. Concert halls extended invitations for her to perform solo recitals. It was as if the entire world wanted a piece of her, and Eleanor wasn't sure how to handle it. At first, she retreated into the comfort of her home, seeking solace in the familiar rhythms of her daily routine. She watered her roses, brewed cups of chamomile tea, and sat at her piano, letting its familiar melodies soothe her racing thoughts. The whirlwind of attention left her feeling both exhilarated and overwhelmed. She had always believed in the transformative power of music, but she never imagined it could reach so many people, or that they would respond with such fervor. Her family became her anchor during this chaotic time. Her daughter, Sarah, flew in from another state to help manage the influx of calls and emails. Together, they sifted through the opportunities, deciding which ones aligned with Eleanor's values and goals. Sarah encouraged her mother to take advantage of this newfound platform to advocate for causes close to her heart. "Mom, this is your chance to make a difference," she said one evening over dinner. You can use your voice, not just your music, to inspire others. Inspired by her daughter's words, Eleanor began considering ways to channel her unexpected fame into meaningful action. She decided to partner with organizations dedicated to supporting arts education, particularly for underprivileged children. Having spent decades teaching music, she understood the profound impact it could have on young minds. She envisioned creating scholarships, funding instruments for schools in need, and hosting workshops where kids could experience the joy of playing an instrument firsthand. This mission resonated deeply with her, giving her a renewed sense of purpose. As weeks turned into months, Eleanor gradually embraced her role as a public figure. She appeared on several television shows, not to dazzle audiences with flashy performances, but to share her philosophy about music and life. In each interview, she spoke candidly about the importance of staying true to oneself, no matter the circumstances. "Don't let anyone dim your light," she often repeated, quoting James. Her sincerity struck a chord with viewers, earning her even more admiration. One of the most memorable moments came when she returned to the same daytime show that had launched her journey. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. The audience greeted her with a standing ovation before she even touched the piano keys, a testament to the lasting impression she had made. When asked how she felt about the overwhelming response to her performance, Eleanor smiled warmly and said, "I think people are hungry for authenticity. We live in a world that moves so fast, and sometimes we forget to slow down and feel. Music reminds us of that. It connects us to our humanity." Her second performance on the show was equally breathtaking. This time, she chose to play Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, a piece that held special significance for her. As she explained to the host beforehand, it was one of the first compositions James had introduced her to when they were dating. "Every time I play it, I feel like he's sitting beside me again," she said, her voice soft but steady. When she began, the room fell silent once more, the haunting beauty of the sonata wrapping itself around everyone present. By the end, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. The ripple effects of Eleanor's journey extended far beyond her personal achievements. Her story sparked conversations about the value of preserving classical music in modern culture and the importance of nurturing creativity at every stage of life. Schools invited her to give master classes, where she emphasized the emotional connection between musician and listener. Young students marveled at her ability to convey complex emotions through simple notes, learning lessons that went far beyond technique. Despite the whirlwind of activity, Eleanor remained grounded. She continued, tending to her garden, finding peace in the quiet moments amidst the chaos. Her sequined shawl hung neatly in her closet, a reminder of the night she stepped onto a national stage and refused to compromise who she was. Though her life had changed dramatically, her core remained unchanged. She was still the same woman, who found joy in the small things, in the scent of fresh flowers, the warmth of sunlight streaming through her window, and the gentle hum of her piano. Looking back on everything that had transpired, Eleanor couldn't help but smile. She had started this journey hoping to share her love for music with others, never dreaming it would lead to such extraordinary outcomes. Yet, in a way, none of it surprised her. Music had always been her constant companion, guiding her through life's highs and lows. Now it had opened doors she never knew existed, allowing her to touch hearts across the globe. And while she didn't seek fame or recognition, she accepted it graciously, using it as a tool to spread kindness and inspiration. After all, that was what James would have wanted, for her to shine brightly, sharing her gift with the world. Eleanor's newfound fame became a double-edged sword. On one hand, it brought her immense joy to see how her music touched so many lives. She received letters from people of all ages and backgrounds, students who had rediscovered their love for classical music, parents who wanted their children to learn piano because of her story, and even elderly individuals inspired to pick up long-abandoned hobbies. Every note she played seemed to ripple outward, inspiring others to embrace their passions and live authentically. But on the other hand, the sudden spotlight forced her to navigate challenges she had never anticipated. The demands on her time grew exponentially. Concert halls around the world clamored for her presence, offering lucrative deals for sold-out performances. Record labels begged her to sign contracts that promised international tours and album releases. Television shows invited her back repeatedly, eager to capitalize on her charm and wisdom. At first, Eleanor tried to keep up with everything, believing she owed it to those who supported her to say yes. But soon, the relentless pace began to take its toll. Her once quiet days were now filled with phone calls, meetings, and travel arrangements. The simplicity she cherished in her life started slipping away, replaced by a whirlwind of obligations. Her family noticed the change immediately. Sarah, her daughter, often found her mother sitting quietly at the kitchen table late at night, staring into space with a look of exhaustion etched across her face. "Mom," Sarah said gently one evening, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder, "you don't have to do all of this. You're allowed to set boundaries." Eleanor sighed deeply, her shoulders slumping under the weight of responsibility. "I know," she replied softly, "but every opportunity feels like a chance to make a difference. How can I turn them down?" Sarah understood her mother's desire to give back but knew something had to change. Together, they devised a plan to streamline Eleanor's commitments, focusing only on opportunities that aligned with her values and allowed her to maintain balance. They hired a part-time assistant to handle logistics, freeing Eleanor to focus on what truly mattered, her music and her message. Slowly, she regained control over her schedule, carving out time for rest, reflection, and the simple pleasures she held dear. Despite scaling back, Eleanor threw herself wholeheartedly into projects that resonated with her heart. One of her proudest achievements was the creation of a foundation dedicated to arts education. Named after James, the James Harper Music Initiative aimed to provide resources and scholarships to underserved communities, ensuring that every child had access to musical instruments and instruction. Eleanor poured her energy into fundraising events, collaborating with schools and hosting benefit concerts where she performed alongside young musicians. Watching these students blossom under her guidance filled her with pride, reminding her why she had fallen in love with teaching decades ago. Her advocacy work extended beyond classrooms. Eleanor became a vocal champion for senior citizens, urging society to recognize the value of older generations. In interviews and public appearances, she spoke passionately about the importance of staying active and engaged later in life. "Age is just a number," she often said. "It doesn't define what you're capable of achieving. There's always room to grow, to create, to inspire." Her words struck a chord with millions, particularly those who felt invisible or undervalued. In a culture obsessed with youth, many seniors wrote to thank her for giving them hope and courage to pursue dreams they thought were lost to time. As years passed, Eleanor continued performing, though not as frequently as before. Each concert became a cherished event, drawing crowds eager to witness her magic firsthand. Unlike the flashy productions typical of modern performances, hers were intimate affairs. No elaborate lighting, no choreographed movements, just Eleanor and her piano. She introduced each piece with a personal anecdote, sharing stories about how the music shaped her life. These moments created a profound connection with her audience, transforming ordinary recitals into unforgettable experiences. One such performance took place in a small-town auditorium nestled in the countryside. The venue was modest, seating barely 300 people, but the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. As Eleanor walked onto the stage, dressed in her signature navy blue dress and pearl necklace, the audience erupted into applause. She smiled warmly, bowing slightly before taking her seat at the piano. That evening, she chose to play Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece she described as a love letter to the moonlit nights I shared with my husband. When her fingers touched the keys, the room fell silent. The delicate melody unfolded like petals blooming in slow motion, filling the air with a sense of wonder and nostalgia. For those few minutes, everyone present forgot about the outside world, their worries, their struggles, their differences. All that remained was the music, weaving hearts together in a shared moment of beauty. When the final note faded, The silence lingered for a beat before the crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Some wiped away tears. Others simply sat in awe, unable to process what they had just experienced. Afterward, during a brief Q&A session, an elderly woman stood up hesitantly, clutching a tissue in her trembling hands. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Your music reminded me of my own husband who passed away last year. Hearing you play tonight made me feel like he was here with me again." Eleanor nodded, her own eyes glistening. "Music has a way of bringing us closer to the ones we love," she replied gently. "I'm glad it could do that for you." These interactions fueled Eleanor's determination to keep sharing her gift. Though her body occasionally protested, her fingers ached more than they used to, and fatigue crept in faster. She refused to let physical limitations stop her. Instead, she adapted, practicing shorter sessions and pacing herself carefully. Her resilience inspired countless others, proving that perseverance and passion could overcome any obstacle. Even as her health began to decline in her mid-80s, Eleanor remained steadfast in her mission. She recorded several albums, capturing her interpretations of classical masterpieces for future generations to enjoy. Proceeds from the sales went directly to her foundation, ensuring that her legacy would continue long after she was gone. She also wrote a memoir, Keys to My Heart, detailing her journey from a shy girl learning piano to a global icon whose music transcended barriers. The book became an instant bestseller, resonating with readers who saw themselves in her story of quiet determination and unwavering faith. By the time Eleanor reached her 90s, her public appearances grew rare, but her impact endured. Schools named music programs after her, and statues of her playing the piano were erected in parks and cultural centers. Young musicians cited her as their inspiration, crediting her with reigniting interest in classical music among younger audiences. Her foundation flourished, reaching thousands of children annually and fostering a new generation of artists. On her 92nd birthday, Eleanor returned to the same television studio where her journey had begun. The occasion marked the anniversary of her iconic performance, and the show's producers invited her back to celebrate. This time, however, the audience greeted her with a standing ovation before she even entered the stage, a testament to the indelible mark she had left on the world. As she sat down at the piano, her frail hands resting lightly on the keys, she closed her eyes and let the music flow through her one last time. When the final note faded, the applause was deafening. Tears streamed down Eleanor's cheeks as she rose to bow, overwhelmed by gratitude and love. It was a fitting conclusion to a life lived fully, authentically, and beautifully. And though her physical presence would eventually fade, her spirit, embodied in every note she played, would continue to resonate, touching hearts for generations to come. Eleanor Harper passed away peacefully on a crisp autumn morning, surrounded by the people and things she loved most: her family, her garden bathed in golden sunlight, and the gentle hum of her piano waiting patiently in the corner. She was 92 years old, her life a testament to resilience, authenticity, and the transformative power of music. Though her passing left a void in the lives of those who knew her personally, her legacy lived on in ways that reached far beyond her small town, or even her country. Her funeral was a celebration of life, attended by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched directly or indirectly. Friends, former students, musicians, and strangers alike gathered to honor the woman who had reminded them of the beauty of staying true to oneself. The service opened with a recording of Eleanor playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, the piece that had stunned audiences during her television debut. As the rich chords filled the air, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Her daughter Sarah delivered a heartfelt eulogy, speaking not just of Eleanor's accomplishments, but also of her kindness, humility, and unwavering belief in the goodness of others. "Mom always said that music is more than sound, it's connection," Sarah told the crowd, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "She taught us all how to listen, not just to notes on a page, but to each other. And through her example, she showed us what it means to live with purpose and grace." Afterward, attendees were invited to share their own memories of Eleanor. A young man named Daniel stepped forward, clutching a violin case tightly in his hands. He explained that he had been one of the first recipients of a scholarship from the James Harper Music Initiative. Before meeting Eleanor, he had almost given up on his dream of becoming a professional musician, discouraged by financial struggles and self-doubt. But after hearing her perform and learning about her journey, he found renewed hope. "She didn't just give me money for lessons," Daniel said, his voice trembling with emotion. "She gave me permission to believe in myself. I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for her." Another speaker was an elderly woman named Margaret, who had attended one of Eleanor's concerts several years earlier. Margaret recounted how she had felt invisible as she aged, dismissed by society as someone whose best days were behind her. Seeing Eleanor on stage, radiant and unapologetically herself, had reignited Margaret's passion for painting, a hobby she hadn't touched in decades. "She made me realize that our worth isn't tied to our age," Margaret said. "It's tied to the love we put into the world." And Eleanor? She poured so much love into everything she did. The stories went on, each one a thread in the tapestry of Eleanor's impact. From teachers inspired to advocate for arts education, to parents determined to nurture their children's creativity, her influence spanned generations and communities. It was clear that while Eleanor may have left this world, her spirit remained alive in the countless lives she had touched. In the months following her death, tributes poured in from around the globe. Schools renamed auditoriums in her honor, and statues of her seated at a piano were unveiled in public spaces. One particularly poignant memorial took place in New York City's Lincoln Center, where a sold-out concert featured renowned musicians performing pieces Eleanor had loved. Between acts, video clips played of her performances and interviews, allowing newer generations to experience her magic firsthand. At the end of the evening, a choir sang Clair de Lune in her memory, their voices blending seamlessly with the melody that had once captivated millions. But perhaps the most enduring aspect of Eleanor's legacy was the continued success of the James Harper Music Initiative. Under Sarah's leadership, the foundation expanded its reach, partnering with schools, community centers, and nonprofit organizations worldwide. Thousands of children received instruments, scholarships, and mentorship opportunities, many of whom might never have discovered their musical talents otherwise. One such recipient was a girl named Lily, who grew up in a low-income neighborhood and initially doubted whether music could be part of her future. Thanks to the initiative, she learned to play the cello and eventually earned a full scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. Years later, when asked about her journey, Lily credited Eleanor for lighting the path. "She believed in kids like me before anyone else did," Lily said. "And because of her, I know I can do anything I set my mind to." Even outside formal programs, Eleanor's story inspired grassroots movements dedicated to preserving classical music and supporting artists of all ages. Amateur musicians began organizing informal recitals in parks and libraries, creating spaces where people could come together to share their love for music. Online platforms buzzed with covers of her favorite pieces, often accompanied by messages, thanking her for reigniting interest in genres some had considered outdated. In essence, Eleanor's influence transformed not just individual lives but entire communities, fostering connections and reminding everyone of the universal language of music. Back in Eleanor's hometown, her home became a museum celebrating her life and work. Visitors could walk through the rooms where she spent her quiet days, sit at her beloved piano, and read excerpts from her memoir displayed on the walls. The garden, now meticulously maintained by volunteers, served as a sanctuary for reflection and inspiration. Every spring, a festival was held in her honor, featuring performances by local musicians and workshops encouraging participants to explore their creative potential. It was a fitting tribute to a woman who had always believed in the importance of nurturing talent and spreading joy. Though Eleanor was no longer physically present, her presence lingered in every note played, every child inspired, and every heart moved by her story. She had proven that greatness isn't defined by fame or wealth, but by the ability to make others feel seen, valued, and capable of achieving their dreams. Her journey, from a shy girl practicing scales in her bedroom to a global icon whose music bridged cultures and generations, was a reminder that authenticity has the power to change the world. Years later, when historians wrote about the early 21st century, they included Eleanor Harper among the figures who had shaped the era, not because she sought recognition, but because she embodied the timeless values of perseverance, empathy, and integrity. Her name became synonymous with the idea that it's never too late to follow your passions, and that sharing those passions can create ripples of positivity that extend far beyond what we imagine. As the sun set over the hills of her hometown, casting long shadows across her garden, it was easy to picture Eleanor sitting at her piano, smiling softly as she played one last melody. Somewhere, somehow, her music still echoed, gentle yet powerful, simple yet profound. And in that echo lay the proof of her enduring legacy, a life well lived, a gift generously shared, and a reminder that even the quietest voices can leave the loudest impressions.